Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, also known as ETCG1 when I do videos on this channel. And you know what, if you're watching this and it is your birthday, I want to wish you a very special happy birthday. Thank you for watching. And congratulations on another lap around the sun. Overbuilding makes it awesomer. That is the topic of today's discussion, and it kind of came up yesterday. In fact, I think Cameraman Brian came up with that phrase. But basically what it means, when you're into a build like this, at least I've found this myself, and that's one of the reasons I'm putting this video out, to see what your feelings are, what your experiences are. I've found that if there's a choice between two parts that do the same thing, I take a look at the specs and all that kind of thing, and I look for the part that might be a little bit better engineered, might be a little bit better than stock, or you know, I want to get the best that I can put on here. And the philosophy is that overbuilding makes it awesomer. Case in point, yesterday, Cameraman Brian and I were working on the fuel system of the Fairmont here, and I was installing an electric fuel pump and a fuel filter in the back by the gas tank. Now, initially, I'd come up with this plan where I would just put an inline filter in the hose in the back before the fuel pump, and I'd put another one up front before the fuel pressure regulator out here. And I did end up doing that, but when I went looking for fuel filters, well, initially I'd ordered just a couple of regular see-through fuel filters because I like to see the fuel going through. I ordered a couple of those, but apparently the company that makes them or whatever was out of stock, and it was going to be months before they'd have another one, and I needed to build this thing now. So I looked up another company and found a totally different fuel filter setup. In fact, it looks like an oil filter. It's this giant thing, filters down to like 4 microns. It's like the fuel filter. It's like, it looks a lot like a diesel fuel filter. You know, I looked at that and it was way more expensive. The whole setup was way more expensive than what I had originally intended to use, which was just a couple of inline filters. And my thought was, okay, well, I can't get those inline filters, number one, but two, if I have this better filter, it's overall going to make the build better. And it can be said that in some ways it is. But would the other filters have done just fine? Most likely they would have done just fine. But this speaks to my point that I'm trying to make in this video, is that especially when you get this deep into a build, you have this tendency when you're buying the parts to try and get the best parts that you can afford. And at this point, I've probably blown the budget on the Fairmont. And part of that is my fault, but part of it's also the fact that I had to do things like buy a different engine block and whole different rotating assembly and flywheel and all this other stuff. And that's what happens. You get past that point of no return and you just start to spend and spend and spend, and you hemorrhage money. And in fact, it's often said when you do something like this, it's like, how fast do you want to spend? And that is a very true statement. I've gone through it with this. I've seen people go through it a lot, but now I'm going through it myself firsthand. And I can honestly say that's exactly what happens, is that you just find yourself in this space to where you're like, I want to make this the best darn car I can possibly make it. So I'm going to throw every dime I have, and some that I don't, that I'm going to end up paying interest on, just so that I can make this awesomer. Overbuilding makes it awesomer. So what are your experiences with your builds? Or you know, do you have mental builds that you're doing and you want to put together? I mean, how are you engineering that in your head, and what do you envision? And obviously that's going to be affected by cost. I'd love to get your thoughts on this topic and see if you've fallen into the same traps that I have. And if you have, how'd you deal with it? Comments down below are awesome. I'll also put a link in the description to a discussion about this video over at ericthecarguy.com. And speaking of ericthecarguy.com, that's where I ask you go if you have automotive questions. Make it super easy by putting a link in the description for you. I'll also put a link in the description to anything else that's pertinent to this video, related videos, that type of thing. So check there if you have questions. Google+, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, if you wish to connect with me socially. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching.